Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a Monday edition of the Watchman Newscast live stream. Great to be here with you and a lot to discuss. A very busy weekend, as it always is, in the world's most volatile and chaotic region, the Middle East. Hey, a few things to cover. Number one, and you see the title and you see the thumbnail of today's live stream. Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of the Iran-backed terror group Hezbollah, his grandson reportedly killed by an IDF drone strike. What are the implications of that? We're going to discuss that. That's a big one, obviously. By the way, in 1997, one of Nasrallah's sons was killed in exchanges with Israel. So a big development there, folks, potentially really hitting Nasrallah where it hurts. And we'll see if this ups the escalation along that Israel-Lebanon border. And speaking of which, today, one foreign national, a foreign worker in northern Israel, killed when Hezbollah launched an anti-tank missile into the north from Lebanon. We want to talk about that as well. Hey, it goes without saying to say that things are escalating along the Israel-Lebanon border. And I believe, and I'm sad to say, but I believe it's a fact, it's if not when, that a great northern war, that's what we've called it here in the newscast, is coming between Israel and Lebanon. The only question is, will it be in the spring, the summer? Is it a year from now? I would say sooner rather than later. No one wants to see it, but here's the problem. It's an unsustainable status quo, if you want to call it that, along that border when you have some 80,000 Israelis, civilians, who've evacuated their homes along the Israel-Lebanon border, who are living out of a suitcase, quite literally, folks. I've described here in the newscast over the past few weeks that last month I was in Israel, met with residents of the north who've been living out of a suitcase for 2 months. They don't know if, when can they ever go back home along that Lebanon border. And if they do, their home may be destroyed by a Hezbollah rocket barrage. So again, it's unsustainable. We'll talk more about that as well. But you see every day, they've been called border skirmishes. Hey, folks, listen, it's much more serious than a skirmish when, here's the numbers for you. According to Hezbollah, since October 8th, and remember, let's back up, on October 8th, the day after Hamas invaded southern Israel, Hezbollah began launching attacks against Israel as well to the north, almost simultaneously in the aftermath of the October 7th massacre. Here's Hezbollah's numbers. Take it with a grain of salt. If they're giving this number, the number is probably much higher. Hezbollah says it has lost 229 terrorists since October 8th in these exchanges with Israel, and apparently 37 other terrorists from various groups on the Lebanon side have also been killed. On the flip side, Israel has lost 10 soldiers, including some reservists, and 7 civilians, including today, there was a foreign guest worker, not an Israeli citizen, this guest worker from Thailand. Nonetheless, this young guy in his 30s was killed by an anti-tank missile. So those are the numbers. That's not a skirmish. This is now going on 4 months of daily battles, barrages, to the point Hezbollah said today that it attacked Israeli troops along the border on the ground. Israel says we know nothing about that. So that might just be some Hezbollah boasting. But nonetheless, folks, you see where this is going, and it's nowhere good. Now, the end result could ultimately be good because it could result in the dismantlement of Hezbollah by the IDF, to peace in the north along the Lebanon border, and Israeli civilians returning to their homes. So that's a good thing. But getting there will be very difficult, and achieving that goal will not be easy. We're going to talk about that. Also, Rafah, the last bastion, the last stronghold for Hamas along the Egyptian border to the south. We were talking north with Hezbollah. Now we're talking south with Hezbollah. Some 1.4 million displaced Palestinians have crowded into Rafah. Israel has done mop-up work, I guess you would say, in Gaza and Khan Yunis over the past few weeks, including over the weekend in Khan Yunis, really hitting Hamas hard there and in Gaza. I say all that to say, ladies and gentlemen, that Rafah is the last stand for Hamas. And the world is wailing and howling and gnashing its teeth as Israel says, look, we're going in because we can't finish the job of crushing Hamas and taking it from power in Gaza if we don't go into Rafah. So we're going in. That's coming. So we'll talk about that as well. And lastly, Ramadan. Are we going to see Ramadan madness? Look, Ramadan, the Muslim holiday, begins on March 10th. There are rumblings that Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader, wants to really. This shows you. It gives you a window, I should say, into the sick, depraved mindset of Hamas. It's a demonic death cult. These are modern day Nazis, only wearing different uniforms. Sinwar is reportedly saying, "Hey, let's kind of up the ante against Israel during Ramadan, because that would mean more dead Palestinian civilians. And the more dead Palestinian civilians, says Hamas leader Sinwar, that's good for us because it creates world sympathy for our cause." What a sick and twisted and depraved mindset. But that's what you're dealing with Hamas. So we've got Ramadan sadly circled March 10th, the beginning of it. And sadly, over the past several years, Palestinian terror groups have used that Ramadan season as a time to, not a time for introspection, but a time to increase attacks against Israel. Last thing, did you see these comments by the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris? Now, we've got viewers from all over the world. I'm here in the United States, of course, but Kamala Harris with some very, shall we say, interesting / infuriating comments about Israel, about Gaza, and she made some headlines, and she usually doesn't make headlines for good reasons, and this is no different. When you hear her comments, it'll make your blood boil a bit. It's just out of touch, tone deaf are the terms that come to mind. So we've got a lot to talk about, right? That's just a little preamble there. That's setting things up. Before we get started, quick reminder to subscribe to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube. Click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hey, we've got a few thousand people with us now. We'll have thousands more before we are done. And when it comes to subscribers, God Almighty has expanded our territory, and we are now close to 900,000 subscribers on the march to 1 million, we believe, this year, 2024, for such a time as this. And we'd love if you could join us here every day as watchmen and women on the wall, not for our glory or our edification, but because we're delivering a message of biblical truth, folks, in a time where good is called evil and evil is called good. So we'd love for you to be here every day. The more subscribers, the more the message will get out there. We believe it's sorely needed in these upside down but prophetic Bible times that we're living in. Two quick programming notes as well before we dig into everything. Number one, the StacksCast, our brand new podcast. We just launched it 2 weeks ago. First two guests, pretty high profile. Hulk Hogan, the WWE legend and probably the most famous wrestler who ever lived. His salvation story, it was amazing. Sat down with the Hulkster for about an hour, my childhood hero. That was episode 1 of the StacksCast, brand new podcast where you can find anywhere you get your podcasts, folks. Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to your podcast, you can get them there. Be sure to subscribe and get the StacksCast with Erick Stakelbeck. Last week, we had Sage Steele, former anchor for ESPN, the largest sports network in the world, talking about cancel culture, how she was canceled because of her conservative views. That's a strong one. And tomorrow debuting, and it'll be up here on our channel as well eventually, but you want to go to Spotify, Apple, and all those great podcast platforms to hear my interview with Nick Vujicic. Now, Nick Vujicic, look, born with no arms and legs, born in Australia, an amazing man, an inspiration, born with no arms and legs, was suicidal at the age of 10, and went on to become one of the world's great evangelists. And that's exactly what he's doing right now. And he talks about his passion for Israel, and he's got a strong message for the Israel haters. So you won't want to miss the latest episode of StacksCast tomorrow with Nick Vujicic. That will be posted tomorrow on all the good podcast platforms. So be sure to check that out and subscribe. Every week, we'll be doing the StacksCast. A lot of great guests there lined up. And folks, these are in-depth conversations. It could be 30 minutes to an hour with an important figure in the body of Christ for kingdom work. And these are in-depth, fascinating discussions you won't want to miss. And lastly, quick reminder, Stakelbeck Tonight, our brand new nightly show launching March 25th 3 weeks from today. Mark your calendars on TBN and TBN Plus. Stakelbeck tonight, every weeknight, Monday through Friday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, then airing again at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time every single night. We've got some exciting things lined up for our brand new nightly show during launch week, but a lot going on, as you can see, and I had to update you all. We've got the 3 legs to it. The Watchman here on YouTube. We've got the StacksCast podcast and the brand new nightly show on TBN. So we just thank God. I say these platforms that we're doing, they're by God and for God. Bold, biblical, unapologetically so. So join us across the board on all of those platforms. Okay, let's get into it. The news from today breaking. Now, we want to get into the death of Nasrallah's grandson, but let's start with that happened over the weekend. But let's break down what happened today along that Israel-Lebanon border. 10 rockets, just before I came on air here with you at 4 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States, 10 rockets fired from Lebanon. I mean, again, these aren't skirmishes. Hello. This is every single day, daily barrages by Hezbollah, including last week. We had 60 rockets in one day, 40 another, launch into the Golan towards the Galilee. These ain't skirmishes, ladies and gentlemen. This is a second front, open, not fully open, but it's open. And all the talk by the Biden administration, more on that in a few minutes, about tamping things down in Lebanon, not having another front open. Too late. Another front is upon you. As I said earlier, Hezbollah opened that second front, not Israel. Hezbollah opened that second front on October 8th, and Hamas opened the first front on October 7th, and then the Houthis went and opened a third front shortly thereafter. So again, message to the West, which is continuing to harangue Israel and say, Israel, don't do anything when it comes to Hezbollah or the Houthis. When the Houthis launch missiles towards Eilat and towards Israel, don't do a thing, because that will open multiple fronts and Iran will get mad. The master of all these proxies, whether it's the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, etc., the Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, you might make Iran mad, then that opens another front. Well, guess what? Again, message to the West, where I am sitting right now. Multiple fronts are open and they are already upon you. There's no turning back at this point. Israel is going to finish the job in Gaza with Hamas, and yes, that means going into Rafah. More on that in a minute. The West already, and we talked about this on the newscast last week, the West already should have finished the job vis-a-vis the Houthis in Yemen. That is mind-boggling and infuriating what's being allowed to continue in Yemen with the Houthis. Oh, God, heaven forbid that we stamp out the Houthis and make Iran mad. Third, clearly, the Lebanon front is open. Not open all the way, but it's open much more than a crack. Today, 10 rockets fired from Lebanon. Iron Dome, the Israeli anti-missile system, thankfully intercepted some of them. Second, as we mentioned at the top, a native of Thailand, 10, let's see, at least 7, I'm sorry, I just jotted down some notes right before I came on air here. I'm going to get the numbers right. At least 7 foreign workers from Thailand, 2 severely injured, 7 wounded overall, and 1 killed in a Hezbollah anti-missile strike pointed at northern Israel. Folks, this just continues on a daily basis, and it's all building towards something. And just to remind you of last week and what we shared here, 2 things to keep in mind when we talk about the North and that coming great Northern War, which I believe has major prophetic implications in terms of those chess pieces moving on the board and setting things up for Ezekiel's war, the war of Gog and Magog, laid out in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. Funny name, I know, Gog, Magog. You might be saying, what are you talking about? Never heard of it. If you're just watching us for the first time, check out the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. And I believe these nations that will come against Israel will do so in the aftermath of the wars we're seeing right now with Hamas and Hezbollah coming. And perhaps a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, perhaps Iran directly, and also Damascus. The prophet Isaiah, chapter 17, verse 1, talks about a very unpleasant day for one of the world's oldest inhabited cities. These could be all precursors, folks, to a big one, a very big one, the war of Gog Magog, where I believe Russia, Iran, Turkey will be the leaders of a latter days. That's what Ezekiel calls it, latter days, last days coalition that comes against Israel. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. In the meantime, we're talking Great Northern War. Two things to keep in mind before we get to Nasrallah's grandson. Number one, last week, the United States expressed worry, grave concern, U.S. officials off the record speaking to the mainstream media, saying we're really nervous that Israel may launch a summer or more likely a spring offensive against Hezbollah. Heaven forbid they would do that. Look, again, no one wants to see a war, but what would you do? I was just in Israel a few weeks ago. I spent a good chunk of time in closed military zones in the north. We were granted exclusive access by the Israel Defense Forces. Apologies. It looks like some lights went off here. I am in a studio. Looks like some lights just went off. Hey, the wonders of live TV. Hopefully you can still see me. But so the U.S. is wailing about this. And by the same token, the Iranian regime is saying, look, let there be light. I see some lights coming back on. Yes, God, let there be light. In all seriousness, folks, not to joke, I'm in our brand new TBN Global Headquarters right outside of Fort Worth, Texas, DFW, Dallas, Fort Worth. Just some background. You're saying, why the lights go out? What's going on? We have this beautiful new studio. I can't show it to you yet because you're going to see it on March 25th with the launch of Stakelbeck tonight on TBN. But we're doing tests. We're doing rehearsals. We're getting this studio ready to roll, man, on March 25th. So the team, they're not playing a joke on me, I promise. The team is, you'll see some lights. I see they're doing some stuff out there. Man, it is, let me just say, this complex, our brand new TBN Global Headquarters, where you will see Stakelbeck tonight, the Watchman, everything coming out of here. It's 5 acres of land. It's the size of 5 acres here in DFW. Anyway, I didn't mean to get sidetracked. I wanted you to know it went dark momentarily. It wasn't Hamas sabotaging the live stream. It was just our trusty team doing some work here. But okay, U.S. bitterly opposed to any Israeli strike. And by the same token, Iran saying last week that it has given the green light to Hezbollah to escalate because Iran is also concerned that Israel is going to act soon, that as soon as Israel is done in Rafah, that Israel will turn and move against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And I think in this case, the Iranian regime, they are evil and wicked, but they're not stupid. And I think that their line of thinking is correct in this case, that look, folks, Israel right now, okay, 300,000 at least reservists called up. The nation's united, resilient. I was just there. Israelis are united in this. I mean, on war footing, battle season, this is the time. If you're going to take out Hezbollah, this is the time to move. It would seem. There are brilliant military strategists in the Israel Defense Forces. They know much more than me, needless to say. But from a layman's view, stepping back and observing this, you're already in a shooting war with Hezbollah. It's just not a full-scale war. Again, 300,000 reservists, the nation's united, battle-hardened, battle-tested. The Iran axis is already on its heels. They'll be licking their wounds after the demise of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Man, oh man, this seems to be the time to act. But again, the IDF and the planners and the Israeli government, they may know more than me. Again, that's my view of it. And many Israelis agree with me, by the way, just being on the ground, and not only just Israeli civilians, but Israelis in higher echelons are pretty much saying the same thing, that we need to do this. And the main reason, ladies and gentlemen, and I say to the Biden administration, who are saying, we're trying to prevent a northern war. What would they do? They're saying, okay, diplomatic solution. We need the UN to push Hezbollah has got to agree to UN efforts, international community, quote unquote, efforts to push them back from the Israel-Lebanon border. Well, good luck with that. Really, good luck with getting Hezbollah to agree to that. What would you do, Biden administration, if 80,000 Americans along the Mexico border were forced to evacuate from their homes and had no way of returning? Well, you know what? You're probably not the best people to ask, because the southern border of the United States right now is an absolute disaster and it's wide open. So sorry, I'm probably not asking the right people. I know exactly what you would do. So no wonder you're trying to tie Israel's hands. But I was in a hotel, folks, on the Sea of Galilee with 90% of my fellow residents of this hotel a few weeks ago. They weren't from the Galilee. They were from northern Israel. And they can't go back. They've been living out of suitcases for 2 months. Nasrallah's grandson. Let's get into it. Hezbollah leader Nasrallah is from Al Arabiya, Middle Eastern news source. And this is all over the region right now and all the news sources. Hezbollah leader Nasrallah's grandson, reading this off my phone, reportedly killed in Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon. It was a drone strike over the weekend. The Iran-backed group Hezbollah announced that Abbas Ahmed Khalil was one of the militants killed, quote, on the road to Jerusalem, which is a phrase Hezbollah has been using to describe those killed by Israeli strikes since the start of the Gaza war. I want to come back to that, the road to Jerusalem. Israeli reports, citing a Syrian opposition media outlet, said Nasrallah's grandson, Khalil, was one of 3 Hezbollah militants, I call them terrorists, killed in southern Lebanon over the weekend. Nasrallah's son, Hadi, now I don't know if this was the grandson's dad or what, was also killed during clashes with Israel in 1997. At the time, Hassan Nasrallah, again, the leader of Hezbollah, said he was proud that his son was, quote, martyred, and he vowed to continue fighting Israel, and he's done exactly that, as you well know. Now, no comments yet by Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah on the death of his grandson, but his grandson was apparently a player in Hezbollah of some importance as well. So it wasn't just the symbolic value of eliminating the grandson, the kin of the leader of Hezbollah, your bitter foe. He also played a role in the organization. He wasn't just a schlub carrying, gear around for the arch terrorist in Hezbollah. He was heavily involved. And now he reportedly is no more. So what is Hezbollah's response to that? You know it's coming. Look, Nasrallah's grandson taken out. But this, look, we talked about earlier in this newscast, this isn't the first time. There's been a steady string of Hezbollah operatives, including several Hezbollah commanders. Israel has amazing intelligence, not only in Lebanon, but in Syria next door. Remember, it's not just been in Lebanon that these Hezbollah commanders and operatives have been killed. Israel has also targeted them in Syria as well. The response so far to these various deaths been real simple, yet deadly. Hezbollah will increase rocket missile attacks, and in particular, those anti-tank missiles. When I was in Israel a few weeks ago, I was in the north, folks. I was on the Lebanon border in closed military zones. We had exclusive access for the Watchman team. Every IDF spokesperson I talked to and soldier on the ground said, we're really concerned about the anti-tank missiles. And obviously, they left one foreign worker dead today, an anti-missile strike. So rockets, missiles, anti-tank missiles in particular increased. The second thing to watch for is the targets. We had a place like Sfat in the Upper Galilee region bombarded 2 weeks ago. Will Hezbollah get more daring and more bold in the reach of these strikes? We know on the flip side, Israel's growing more daring and bold in its strikes against Hezbollah and striking deeper into Lebanon. Folks, a lot going on. It's an absolute tinderbox on that Israel-Lebanon border. And when I was there, I'm a believer, so I don't have a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind, as the Apostle Paul laid out. But I have to say, there's a feeling of dread to the north. Again, they know that a great northern war is coming because the situation is not sustainable any longer. The residents of the north who've been evacuated, almost 100,000 of them, need to go home or there is no north. Geographically, you have northern Israel, but no one will be living there. And that will be a major, major deterrent, not deterrent, I shouldn't say, a major detriment to Israel's economy. If one vital region of that economic engine is not revving up and going, you're going to have trouble. Israel knows that, so it will be dealt with. Let's talk about Kamala Harris. We mentioned Rafah. That's coming. We mentioned Ramadan, March 10th, the Muslim holy month, where they're supposed to be praying and fasting and introspection, but Hamas has done the exact opposite over the past few years. They've used Ramadan to launch attacks against Israel. And what they do when Israel responds is they say, can you believe these horrible, murderous Zionists, as they would call them? Can you believe what they've done during our holy month? They've shed Muslim blood. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me that it's completely demonic and wicked and diabolical what Hamas does. They strike first. And then when Israel reacts to defend and to prevent more Israelis from being slaughtered, Hamas says, look at what they did to us. And what does the world do? The world doesn't say, hey, well, look, Israel's just defending itself. You struck them first. You initiated this. No, no, no. When Israel strikes back, then the world gets riled up. Then the world starts to flex its muscles and howl at Israel, not Hamas. And Hamas knows this to the point where Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, is reportedly banking on this during Ramadan. More Palestinian casualties is a better thing for Hamas's cause. Hamas, by the way, has full responsibility for those civilian casualties. It launched a war. By the way, thousands of Palestinian civilians streamed in behind Hamas and looted, raped, and pillaged in those Israeli towns. Mainstream media's not reporting that much. Surprise, surprise. I heard firsthand accounts when I was on the Gaza border 3 weeks ago in places like Be'eri, the descriptions of it. It wasn't just Hamas terrorists. It was Gazan civilians who streamed in on October 7th. I digress. Hamas, those same Gazan civilians voted for Hamas in 2006, voted them into power, but Hamas willfully using them as human shields. Rocket launchers in hospitals, schools, playgrounds. If you watch the Watchmen on a regular basis, you know the game here, folks, but the world seems awful slow to catch on, and that includes, I know you're shocked by this, Vice President Kamala Harris. Let's check out her comments yesterday, which are being billed as the strongest comments yet by the Biden administration against Israel. Okay, Kamala urged a 6-week ceasefire. She lost me right away. A 6-week ceasefire with does that mean with no hostages released? Let's see. But if Israel agrees to a premature ceasefire, it leaves Hamas alive to fight another day, and that ain't good. Understatement of the year. Kamala says, people are starving in Gaza. Conditions are inhumane. In the harshest I'm reading this from the Times of Israel, just off my phone, in the harshest comments yet by the administration, the vice president slammed unnecessary restrictions on relief, on humanitarian relief. Hey, here's the thing. She calls it a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. And the immediate ceasefire, she clarified. She then said, look, only if hostages are freed. Okay, thank you. But she says, given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. Immense scale of suffering due 110% to Hamas and its decision to invade Israel on October 7th. These are the consequences when you invade and slaughter 1,200 people in the bloodiest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Sorry, there are consequences for that. There are consequences when you use civilians as the central pillar of your attack and battle strategy, unlike any in world history, quite frankly, where the more civilian deaths, the better. That's literally their philosophy. It's pure evil, where Israel goes to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties. Fighting folks, under the most difficult circumstances known to man in the history of modern warfare, at least, in densely, tightly packed Gaza, where your foe is a vicious terror group with no rules of, doesn't observe any rules of war or rules of engagement, and gladly and gleefully uses civilians as human shields. Tense, dense hand-to-hand combat in alleyways, packed together. And in only 5 months, Israel has practically conquered the entire Gaza Strip. Folks, let me tell you, I don't know how much time we got left on this earth, but I will tell you in the time we do have remaining, military scholars and strategists and historians will study this Israeli campaign in Gaza for years to come, and there might not be many, but they will study this campaign in Gaza. Not as a study of what not to do, but a study of how to do it right against all odds. It's a stunning achievement by the IDF, and the mainstream media is not talking about that. Hamas is in its death throes. And the courageous, brave soldiers, oh man, of the IDF, I was around them a few weeks ago. You know, we talk a lot about Generation Z here in the West and how it's a bit of a struggle. We'll just say that as they walk around like this all day, and I can go on. But Generation Z in Israel is a whole different story. 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids. Yeah, they're young adults, but they're young. And they're eyeball to eyeball, literally in the trenches in Khan Yunis, fighting Hamas terrorists face to face. That's a different kind of metal. It's a different kind of generation over there right now that's being raised up in Israel for such a time as this. Back to Kamala and her comments. Okay. She says, Hamas claims it wants a ceasefire. Well, there's a deal on the table, and Hamas needs to agree to that deal. Good luck. Again, folks, this is entirely unrealistic, pie in the sky, head in the clouds type stuff. Hezbollah is not going to back up from the Lebanon border. It ain't going to happen. Maybe a mile just to avoid casualties. That's it, their own casualties. They're not going to back up beyond the Litani River 20 miles. They will only be expelled from the Israel-Lebanon border by force. Anyone with common sense knows that, but as we like to say here in the newscast, these are times when common sense is not so common. Hence, Kamala saying to Hamas, you need to accept a ceasefire. Okay. Are they going to say, you know what? You're right. We've reconsidered. Since Kamala said that, we're going to do it. We're going to accept it. No. Folks, I'm sad to say there are some demonic, evil, terror entities that only understand resounding defeat by force. Think of the Nazi war machine for one. Think of ISIS for another. Hamas and Hezbollah only understand the language of, we have completely routed you and defeated you. You will no longer be allowed to govern, quote unquote, thrive or prosper along our borders. That's all they'll understand. If you want to have a ceasefire, a diplomatic agreement with them, you're kicking the can down the road a few months, and it'll be right back in your face. Now, we shall see. Hamas, in an act of utter desperation, may indeed agree to a ceasefire, but they better release those hostages. And imploring them to accept a ceasefire ain't going to do it. The only thing that's going to bring them to the table begging for a ceasefire is continued force used against them, where they have no recourse other than to beg for a ceasefire. And that's what Israel's doing rightly. Israel has the right idea there. That's how you bring them to the table. Harris's remarks, okay, people in Gaza are starving. We talk inhumane conditions. Our hearts break for all the innocent people in Gaza who are suffering from what is clearly a humanitarian catastrophe. Again, Kamala, I hear you. Here's the problem. You're laying it at Israel's feet, and your administration is laying this at Israel's feet. Israel was invaded by Hamas, which the people of Gaza voted into office. These are the consequences. It's horrible. No one wants to see any civilian casualties. It's a horrible, horrible fact of war since time immemorial, since the dawn of time. There have been wars, sadly, in this fallen world, and civilians tragically have died in those wars. Man, I didn't see so much concern during World War II for civilian. It's amazing the fixation on Gazan civilians right now. When Hamas, again, was the instigator of this. And they're using civilians as human shields. Shouldn't Kamala Harris be castigating Hamas and laying this at Hamas's feet? And they know, the Biden administration officials know, that Israel has practically tied itself in knots trying to avoid civilian casualties, fighting in essence with one arm tied behind its back. Folks, we could go on. It's frustrating. It's maddening at times. But you know what? Israel's going to stay the course. My biggest takeaway from being there a few weeks ago was that they are resilient and united. And the attitude among the average Israeli was, you know what? We know the world is against us, but we're going to do what we need to do. We're going to finish the job. So, folks, I ask for your prayers right now for the people of Israel, for the IDF, for people who have been separated from their families in Israel. There's so much to pray for, folks, and prayer works. I'll just say a quick story to encourage you as I go. And number one, God Almighty still sits on the throne. These things must happen, but God's in control. Don't forget it. Don't be despondent. Don't be discouraged. Don't hide under your desk right now. God Almighty is still in control. Even when it seems like things are totally out of control, He's got it under control. He's got a plan. And the book of Psalms says, and I love to quote this, Psalm says that God hears the plots and the plans and the schemes being plotted right now by the devious and the wicked, and God literally laughs. But to give you an illustration of how prayer works, I was with a few dear friends in Israel a few weeks ago, and one of my friends is a journalist, and we prayed for the kind of access for him that no one else is getting, the kind of stories that he could bring to the world that no one else is getting. We prayed hard for it. Folks, literally, we get done praying. Two minutes later, his phone rings. It's the IDF giving him exclusive access into the tunnels in Gaza, the kind of places in Khan Yunis that no one else was going at that time. So prayer works. God is a prayer-answering God. He's a promise-keeping God. And guess what? He keeps his promises to the land of Israel, and he'll keep his promises to you. I serve at the pleasure of the King, King Jesus, and we will continue to do so every day here boldly and unapologetically. Hey, thanks so much for joining us here today on The Watchman. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.